So today we have a lot of um, binaries, but let me just start with Luke. There's no nuance here. What Jesus is saying, he's got these four beatitudes, four blessings, and four woes. And when Matthew reports on the Beatitudes, when Jesus is on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, as opposed to the Sermon on the Plain that we just heard, he says not just blessed are the poor, but Matthew tells us, Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit. And he doesn't say blessed are those who hunger. He says blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So it's much easier to take Matthew's and feel comforted by them and to feel like these speak to me. I hunger and thirst for righteousness. I surely do. Luke, there's none of that. Blessed are those who are poor. Blessed are, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. And blessed are you when people hate you. And then, in case it's not clear that that's not about me, he tells where I am. He says, but woe to you that are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now. I have plenty, plenty to eat. Too much. And for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you. So there's a little bit of a yikes in this. I know which side of that equation I am on. It's true that I have been in deep mourning in parts of my life and also deep joy, and they're not always, one or the other either, which kind of gives me a clue to how to think about this. This is paired with Jeremiah that we heard, this reading from Jeremiah, which is also these binaries. Jeremiah says, I find it here. Jeremiah says, cursed are those who trust in mere mortals. They're going to be like a shrub in the desert, and there's no relief. They live in parched places. It's bleak. But then on the flip side, he says, blessed are those who trust in the Lord. And there's a beautiful image. They'll be like a tree planted by water, and the roots go down into the stream, and even when heat comes, it has something to survive on. And then the psalm is very similar. It's that binary. We start out with 3 verses of happy are those who have not walked in the counsel of the wicked, nor lingered in the way of the sinner. They are also like trees planted by water. So there's all this. And then the flip side, it is not so with the wicked. They are like chaff which the wind blows away. So it's all of this binary, right? There's this and there's that. And part of how I can make sense of this, there are a few things I'm going to talk about, but one is that yes, the Bible in other places gives us some binaries, right? The Bible tells us in the first creation story that there was night and there was day. But we know that actually there is also dusk, right? When the day turns into night. There's a sunset, there's a lowering. It's not like all of a sudden now it's dark. There's a gradation there. It's not always one or the other. And same thing, in the morning we have dawn. We have all kinds of things, not just night and day. The Bible talks about God creating the land and the water, but we know there's a marshland, there are bogs, there are wetlands. We know there's a high tide and a low tide. We know it's not so cut and dried, right? We know it's not so clear. Bible tells us male and female, God created us in God's own image. We are created male and female. But we also know that some people are born intersex. Some people are born with both kinds of genitalia. There's a wide variety in the chromosomes. There are people born XY, and there are all kinds of different things that happen in nature, in science, in the way God made us that aren't actually just male or female. So the idea that we are presented with this binary, in some ways to me, I'm comforted by the idea that actually I know there are degrees of things. Even if you look at like Psalm 1, when it says those who do not go in the counsels of the wicked are this way and sinners are this way. And guess what? We are all some of each, right? We are all uh, sinners. We are all good sometimes, and sometimes we make bad decisions. Sometimes we sin. It's not really like there are good people and there are bad people. It's a little more nuanced than that, isn't it? Um, the same about poverty. So the first thing is the binary that maybe we get to kind of think about that in a different way. So the second thing is just to think about poverty and what does that mean? What does it mean if I say I am rich? And I have resources and I have never gone hungry because I didn't have enough money to buy food. Even when groceries are expensive, I have the option of getting what I need. I can make decisions about leaving eggs out of things because they're so darn expensive right now, or they're available to me. I have the option of saying, yeah, I really want to make that certain cake, even though it calls for so many eggs, and I'm going to buy them. I have choices that I can make. On the other hand, the economic climate in first century Palestine, when Jesus was talking, I did a little research, and there was a huge, huge gap between the rich and the poor. 1 to 3% of the population controlled most of the land and the resources. And 90% of the people worked in those fields, worked as farmers or in agriculture, tenant farmers, they were laborers, and many of those lived at the subsistence level or even below subsistence level. There was a huge gap. There was a very small group of people who were middle class. And Luke was one of those, we think. Luke, by tradition and by a reference in 1 Corinthians, I think, was a physician. He was certainly literate because he wrote this book and he wrote the book of Acts. He was well traveled, but I don't think he was part of that 1 to 3%. He had means, and he is reporting on Jesus saying, if you have enough to eat, you're in trouble. So that's a thing. I also am aware that in our world, it's not or in our country, it's not a dissimilar situation. I think there is a lot more middle class than there was, but I have read that a very small percentage, like 1% of the top billionaires in this country, have as much wealth between them, that 1%, as the bottom 50% all combined, which is kind of shocking. And that is only increasing. That gap is increasing. So, if I look at that, maybe I can say, oh, well, yeah, I have plenty, but I don't have $1 billion. I'm not up there, So I guess where I come down to it is just to think about what do I do with my wealth? How generous am I? Does the money that I have allow me to help others? Yes. Does it help me to be generous of heart and generous of spirit, generous with my money and my time and my talent? I'm going to tell a little bit of a story about my dad. My parents were both brought up in evangelical households. They came to the Episcopal Church early in their marriage, and I was born after that, so I am a cradle Episcopalian, as we say. And my dad was, so both of them were tithers. That's a kind of a thing, especially among evangelicals, I think. But I was raised to tithe, and I do. And I remember one time my dad got up at our church in Grace Church Holland, and he was giving the stewardship talk. You know how we do sometimes during stewardship season, we ask people to get up and talk about what Trinity means to them or about their um, experience or their faith journey. Some of you did that this past fall, and it was beautiful. Thank you. And my dad got up, I was a kid, and he talked about a time in his life when, among other things, he talked about this time in his life when he and my mother um, just weren't able to tithe. They just couldn't pay all their bills. He was working at a small Christian college in Massachusetts. He had 5 children at that time, and they just were not able. And he felt, um, he felt bad about it, but he just didn't know what to do. And he told the congregation that he kept track in a log how much money he was, not giving to be tithing. And he kept track of that. And later, when he was able, he paid it all back. My dad's kind of meticulous, but he is a generous, generous man, and he supports all kinds of people. He gives generously to many things, and he's doing fine. Um, I I treasure his example. I also think that the the generosity, as I said, it's also time and talent, and it's also a generosity of spirit. That being able to forgive someone, even when you think they don't deserve it, that takes a generosity of spirit. Being able to strive hard to see the integrity and the dignity of every human being, even when you disagree with them so completely, um, that's a generosity of spirit. And again, to me, that shows degrees because, when I think about, well, you know, there are degrees in everything and there's a gradation. There's a part of me that's like, am I just being wishy-washy? And when it comes to the baptismal promises and I say I need to respect the dignity of every human being, to me that's an absolute. But I also realize that that's easier for me to do with some people than others. And me striving and striving and doing my best is part of that, those degrees, that uh, it's hard to accomplish all the time, but you keep trying and you keep trying even though you think maybe they don't deserve it, because in God's economy, maybe none of us do and maybe all of us do deserve God's love. The collect that we opened with today, the what I like to call the collect du jour, the collect of the day, um, it starts out, "O God, the strength of all who put their trust in you." And I think that is the key, that wherever we are on the economic scale, wherever we are um, in being able to love our neighbors, wherever we are, we can only get to the place where we need to be by putting our strength in God. Oh God, the strength of all who put their trust in you. So we put our trust in God's strength over and over, not just once, over and over and over again. And may we all strive to do that. Amen.